Hello and welcome to the Scatterable channel, and today let's talk about the title of this video. There are quite a few graphics cards on the market that can do 1440p gaming. That's pretty obvious, but which ones can do that resolution at a frame rate of 144 frames per second and above on a lot of games where a high frame rate matters, all the while keeping the frame times, so how quickly those frames are rendered to your display, as low as possible. Having high frame rate combined with a low frame time will result in a buttery smooth gaming experience with the least amount of input lag, which is really beneficial for competitive gaming. And the graphics card that I think will do it the best at 1440p at refresh rates above 144 Hz is the RTX 3080. But specifically for this video, the PNY RTX 3080 XLR8 Gaming Revel EPIC-X Edition graphics card. So why I think this graphics card is better than other candidates for this task is because, one, this graphics card supports NVIDIA's DLSS technology, which opts us to use DLSS performance, where we can use AI upscaling to actually run the game at a lower resolution, but still have it displayed at somewhat of a 1440p resolution that looks good enough to the eye. But the benefit of that is that we'll get even more frames per second, and that'll be really beneficial in games like Fortnite, where it supports that. Secondly, in a worst case scenario, if we need an even lesser frame time, this graphics card does support NVIDIA Reflex in case we need to use that. And third, this card, honestly, just from reviews alone, is sort of in a league of its own for 1440p gaming, because for casual 1440p gaming, it's overkill, which is just what we need for competitive 1440p gaming. So while this graphics card can render a lot of frames per second quite highly at that resolution, it'll give us the best chance at having those with the lowest frame time, which is just what we need. So in this video, I'll be using this graphics card and pushing it to its limits to see if we can find that balance between graphical fidelity, high frame rates, and low frame times on games where it matters, as well as games that you guys probably have already played a bunch on your own PCs. But first, let's talk about the graphics card. I want to show you guys what we're dealing with for today. Anyways, it has a base clock speed of 1440 megahertz, a boost clock speed of 1710 megahertz. This features 10 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory, and this has a TDP of 320 watts. Now, something interesting I've noticed about this 3080 specifically is that its base clock speed and its boost clock speed are actually quite low compared to other cards, and as a result of that and this PNY cooler, its average temperatures were pretty decent, honestly, for the frame rates that you're getting and for that sort of TDP, and the card just in general is quite silent. Even in, say, like a game lobby or a game menu where the frame rate is uncapped, this card does not suffer from any coil whine, so it's a really quiet card, but it performs really good, which is awesome. So for the goals of benchmarking this graphics card, we're looking for about 144 frames per second or higher depending on the game, since a lot of you guys who may be watching this video are probably rocking 1440p 144 Hz monitors. So again, we want to strike that nice balance between graphical fidelity, high frame rate, and low frame times. And to see if the frame times that we're getting are any good, we will be taking our frame time by comparing it to doing 1 divided by the frames per second. And the closer we get to that number, the better. So for example, if we have a game running at 144 frames per second, optimally, we want the frame time to be below 6.9 milliseconds, which is 1 divided by 144. So starting with Call of Duty Warzone, and I decided to turn on ray tracing, with it being graphically maxed out at 1440p, the average frame rate was 162.9 with a 1% low of 115.6, and the 90th percentile frame time was about 7.3 milliseconds, which is a little bit off 6.13, but I think that's acceptable considering ray tracing is on. If we turned it off, that'd be much less stress on the graphics card, and that would be a lot closer to 6.13. Moving on to PUBG, maxed out with sharpening on and motion blur on because we can afford to do that on this graphics card. we got an average frame rate of 168.2 and a 1% low of 107.9. And as for the frame time, the 90th percentile was 7 milliseconds, and 1 divided by 168 puts us at about 5.9. So again, just about 1 millisecond off, not bad. If we turned off motion blur and sharpening, maybe we would have gotten closer to that 5.9. For CSGO though, with everything dialed up, we got an average frame rate of 285.5 and the 1% low of 114.8, and with almost no micro stuttering. The 90th frame time was about 4.6 milliseconds, which is not too far away from 3.5 milliseconds. For Valorant, maxed out with experimental sharpening turned on, we got an average frame rate of 459.4 and a 1% low of 270.3. And for the 90th percentile frame time, we got 2.5 milliseconds, which is very close to the 2.2 milliseconds we're shooting for. But now moving on to the final two titles, which I did decide to overclock on this graphics card, and we'll compare the stock and overclock speeds. For Fortnite, with ray tracing on at epic settings, I got an average frame rate of 147.5, a 1% low of 87.2, and a 90th percentile frame time of 9.1 milliseconds, which is actually the worst on this list so far compared to the 6.8 we're shooting for. But when we overclock the graphics card, of course this is in a different match and a different setting, so the frame rate is going to be different. But for the average frame rate, I got 184.3 and a 1% low of 117.1, and a 90th percentile frame rate of 6.5 milliseconds, which is much closer to the 5.4 milliseconds that we want at that frame rate. So in that case, overclocking did assist in lowering our frame times while again keeping our frame rates high. But for the other game, which is a much more controlled setting, which would be the Rainbow Six benchmark, that completely maxed out again at 1440p, got an average frame rate of 230.4, a 1% low of 165, and a 90th percentile frame rate of 5 milliseconds, which is again pretty close to 4.3 milliseconds. But it got even better when we overclocked the card, because then we got an average frame rate of 245.3, a 1% low of 178.2, and a 90th percentile frame time of 4.5 milliseconds, even closer to the 4.1 millisecond frame time that we want. So in conclusion, if you really wanted to dial up this graphics card to make it the most ultra competitive, I think you will have to dial back some of the graphical settings in game, because the less stress that is on this graphics card, the better it can render out frames quicker to your monitor. So you may have to bite the bullet, turn off ray tracing, turn off fancy shading or global illumination, just to make sure this graphics card can pump out the frames that you need. And I guess specifically with the PNY RTX 3080 XLR8 Gaming Revel EPIC-X edition graphics card, like I said at the beginning of the video, the base and boost clock speeds of this graphics card out of the box are actually quite low compared to other 3080s, but I don't mind that, because the raw power of the 3080 alone is plenty for 1440p gaming, and more so for competitive 1440p gaming on those popular FPS and esports titles where you want those ridiculously high frame rates, which compared to normal games may seem totally overkill. But if you want those absolute lowest frame times, you're gonna have to get one of these graphics cards. And again, with those lower boost clock speeds, I mean, this card is gonna run more silent, I think, versus others. It's gonna stay cooler, which is just better in the long run for the lifespan of this graphics card. And it looks cool too. It's got RGB and all that fun stuff. So that is it for this video feature on the PNY RTX 3080. Name of the graphics card, because I've said it quite a few times already in this video, and it is quite the tongue twister. But if you want to check it out, I'll have a link for it in the description below. And with all that said, if you want to become more involved with the Scatterable community, I have a Discord, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Am I missing one? Did I already say Instagram? Maybe? Oh, and a Twitch. Yes, that's the other one. That is all linked in the description below. And I want to thank you for watching this video. So with all that said, this is the Scatterable channel. signing out.